Welcome to the world of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy the listening. The roar of the crowd thundered through the ancient stone corridors of Zardoz Arena. Thorn kept to the shadows, his boots silent against the worn steps as he ascended toward the spectator levels. The familiar stench of blood and sweat mingled with the metallic tang of advanced technology. A contradiction that defined this world where barbarism met supposed civilization. He emerged onto a viewing platform just as the afternoon's entertainment began. Below, in the vast circular arena, a figure caught his attention. Even from this distance, the prisoner's violet skin seemed to shimmer under the harsh sunlight. She stood tall despite the heavy chains binding her wrists, her chin raised in defiance as Prince Korinos' amplified voice boomed across the arena. "Behold the fate of those who dare defy progress." The prince's hologram towered above the crowd, his aristocratic features twisted with barely contained rage. This Zalan thought her diplomatic status would protect her while she spread sedition among her kind. Today, she learns the price of such arrogance. Thorn's jaw tightened. He'd heard of the Zalan, who hadn't. Their species had been systematically enslaved, their natural ability to produce intense pleasure in others turned against them by the so-called civilized races. But this one was different. There was steel in her stance, intelligence in the way her eyes scanned the crowd. The gates beneath Korinos' hologram groaned open. A starved earth lion padded out, its cybernetic enhancements glinting. The crowd's excitement peaked. They loved nothing more than watching primitive earth creatures tear apart their entertainment. "Release the bonds," Korinos commanded. "Let her dance for us one last time." The chains fell away. The Zalan woman, Thorn had caught her name, Rena, in the whispers around him, moved with fluid grace despite her predicament. The lion circled, its augmented muscles bunching beneath its scarred hide. "Pathetic," a voice sneered nearby. "Using earth beasts, the prince grows soft." Thorn had seen enough. He drew his sword, an anachronism in this age of energy weapons. But then, that was the point. The arena's ancient rules prohibited advanced weaponry. Honor through combat, they called it. His lips curved in a cold smile as he vaulted over the barrier. The crowd's gasp was audible as he landed in a crouch between Rena and the lion. Rising slowly, he leveled his blade at the beast. "With this sword," he announced, his voice carrying across the sudden silence, "I claim the prisoner as mine by right of combat." His eyes swept the crowd, challenging anyone to object. "Unless someone wishes to dispute my claim." The lion lunged. Thorn pivoted, his blade describing a perfect arc through the air. The beast's momentum carried it past him, but its head didn't follow. It tumbled separately into the sand, cybernetic implants sparking uselessly. Blood soaked into the arena floor as Thorn turned to face Rena. Up close, her beauty was even more striking, but it was the calculation in her eyes that interested him. She studied him like a complex equation, trying to solve his purpose. "Why?" she asked, her voice low and musical. Before he could answer, Korinos' hologram flickered with rage. "You dare interrupt official justice? Who are you, primitive, to—" "I am Thorn." He didn't raise his voice, but the name rippled through the crowd. He heard the whispers. "The Alacris Slayer. The one who never runs. Death's shadow." The prince's hologram wavered. Even he knew that name, knew the stories of 100 invincible Alacris warriors fallen to one man's blade. "The woman is mine now," Thorn stated flatly. "Unless you wish to dispute it personally, Your Highness." The silence stretched as Korinos' hologram flickered. Finally, the prince's laughter echoed across the arena, hollow and forced. "Very well, barbarian. Take your prize. But remember, on Zardoz, everything has a price." The hologram vanished. Around them, the crowd erupted in a mixture of cheers and disappointed mutters. They'd been denied their bloody spectacle, but gained an even better story to tell. Thorn turned to Rena, keeping his expression neutral despite the way her violet skin seemed to catch the light. She stood perfectly still, watching him with those calculating eyes. "You're free to go," he said. Her musical laugh held no humor. "Free? In this galaxy?" She gestured at the crowd, her movement elegant despite her recent bondage. "Look around you, hero. There's no such thing as freedom for my kind anymore. Then come with me." He sheathed his sword, noting how she tensed at the movement. "Unless you prefer to wait for the prince's next entertainment." A group of arena guards approached cautiously, their ceremonial spears marking them as part of the traditional combat protocols rather than modern security. Their leader, a heavily augmented woman, bowed slightly to Thorn. "The victor's exit is this way," she said, pointing to a shadowed archway. "Though I should warn you, the streets outside are unsettled today." Thorn nodded. He'd noticed the tension in the city, the way various factions were positioning themselves around the arena district. Karinos's public execution of a former diplomat had drawn all sorts of interested parties. "Well?" he asked Rena. She studied him for another long moment before gracefully inclining her head. "Lead on, my mysterious champion. Though I wonder, do you always make a habit of interrupting executions, or am I special?" "You talk too much for someone who nearly died," he responded, starting toward the exit. "And you're too serious for someone who just upstaged a prince," she countered, falling into step beside him. Despite her outward composure, he noticed her quick glances at the crowds, the way she calculated distances to exits. They passed through the archway into a torch-lit corridor. The traditional lighting was another of Zeridos's contradictions. Fusion power ran the city above, but down here they clung to ancient ways. "The prince won't let this go," Rena said quietly as they walked. "You've made yourself a target." Thorn's laugh was barely more than a grunt. "I've been a target since birth. One more enemy won't make a difference." "Ah, so the stories are true then? The great warrior who slaughtered the Alacris? The man who never runs?" Her tone was light, but her eyes missed nothing. "Tell me, what makes a legend decide to save one Zalan slave?" Before he could answer, shouts echoed from ahead. A group of armed figures blocked the exit, their weapons a mix of traditional blades and forbidden energy guns. "Speaking of targets," Thorn muttered, drawing his sword again. "Stay behind me." "My hero," Rena said dryly, but she moved to his back. "Though you should know, I'm not entirely helpless." The first attacker charged, and Thorn's blade sang through the air. The real fight was about to begin, and with it the consequences of his choice to intervene would start to unfold. The corridor erupted in chaos. Thorn moved with lethal precision, his blade finding gaps in armor and deflecting energy bolts with its enhanced surface. The attackers fell one by one, their bodies creating a growing barrier between him and their companions. Flash of memory. A younger Thorn stands among the burning ruins of his home colony, watching the Alacris warriors celebrate their victory. Their chitinous armor gleams as they drag away survivors. His family's screams echo in his ears. He grips his father's sword, still too small to wield it properly, and makes a silent vow. "Behind you!" Rena's warning snapped him back to the present. She had already taken down 2 attackers using their own momentum against them, her movements graceful despite the lingering effects of her imprisonment. A massive brute with cybernetic arms rushed them. Thorn spun, blade ready, but Rena was faster. She touched the attacker's exposed skin, just a brief contact, and the man collapsed, overwhelmed by the intense pleasure response unique to Zalan biology. Another memory surfaces in Rena's mind. Her first diplomatic mission, believing she could help broker peace between her people and their oppressors. The way the council members looked at her, not as an equal, but as a commodity. One of them reaching for her, saying, "Perhaps we could negotiate more, privately." "Impressive," Thorne commented, dispatching another attacker. "Though I'm guessing that's why your kind ended up in chains." "A gift becomes a curse when others fear it," she replied, her voice bitter. "We were healers once, using our abilities to ease pain. Now we're reduced to pleasure slaves and arena spectacles." The last attacker fell, and silence descended on the corridor. Thorne quickly searched the bodies, finding a mix of gang tattoos and royal insignias. "Hired thugs," he concluded. "Corinos is testing us." "He'll do worse," Rena said, wiping blood from a shallow cut on her arm. "I've seen what happens to those who defy him. The arena was meant to be my public humiliation, but now—" She studied Thorne with renewed interest. "Why did you really save me?" The memory hits him again, standing over the last Alacris warrior, sword dripping with their acidic blood. The satisfaction hollow as he realized revenge hadn't filled the void. A wanderer now, moving from world to world, taking jobs that let him fight the kind of oppression that destroyed his home. "Let's move," he said instead of answering. "There's a safe house in the lower districts. We can plan our next move there." They emerged into Zeridos's perpetual twilight, the massive city towers blocking out most of the natural sunlight. Hover vehicles zipped between buildings above while street-level crowds parted before them, recognizing the danger in Thorne's stance and the exotic allure of his companion. "I won't be your possession," Rena said suddenly as they walked. "Whatever your reasons for saving me, understand that." Thorne's laugh was unexpected and genuine. "If I wanted a slave, I would have chosen an easier method than challenging a prince in his own arena." For the first time, a real smile curved Rena's lips. "Perhaps there's hope for you yet, warrior." She glanced at the blood on his sword. "Though I suspect we've only begun to see what your interference will cost us both." As they disappeared into the city's shadows, neither noticed the small drone following them, its camera feeding directly to Prince Corinos's private chambers. The real game was just beginning, and the stakes were higher than either of them knew. Midnight cast deep shadows across the safe house's sparse living area. Thorne sat by the window, watching the city's endless streams of aerial traffic while cleaning his sword, a meditative ritual he'd performed thousands of times before. Another memory surfaced. The weight of his father's sword, too heavy for his young hands. The years of training, of building strength until the blade became an extension of himself. The faces of those he'd lost, driving him forward. A soft sound drew his attention. Rena stood in the doorway, wrapped in a translucent robe that did little to hide her violet skin or perfect form. Her eyes held a mixture of determination and resignation. "Can't sleep?" he asked, continuing to work on his blade. "How can anyone sleep when death follows so closely?" She moved toward him with fluid grace. "I've seen how Corinos destroys his enemies. Perhaps." Her hand reached for the tie of her robe. "We should make the most of whatever time remains." Thorne set his sword aside. "Stop." "Why?" Her smile held a trace of bitterness. "Isn't this what everyone wants from my kind? The famous pleasure only a Zalan can provide?" She took another step closer. "I owe you my life. Let me repay you in the only way I—" "If you think that's why I saved you," he cut in, "you're wrong. Every man I've ever met has wanted this." Her laugh was hollow. "Even the noblest ones succumb eventually. It's what we are, what we're meant for." "No." He met her gaze steadily. "It's what others decided you're meant for." The memory washed over him, bittersweet and sharp. A marketplace on a distant world. Lyle, young and laughing, her violet skin darker than Rena's, her spirit unbroken by the galaxy's cruelty. teaching him that there was more to life than revenge, showing him how to smile again. "I knew someone like you once," he said quietly. "Her name was Lili." Rena's expression shifted. "You've been with a Zalan before?" "I loved one." He turned back to the window. "Years ago, when I was younger and angrier at the universe, she helped me remember who I was beyond the warrior, beyond the vengeance that drove me. She showed me there was still beauty in the galaxy." "What happened to her?" "She died." His voice was flat. "Fighting for her people's freedom, like you were trying to do." Rena pulled her robe tighter, all pretense of seduction gone. "That's why you interfered today, because I reminded you of her." "No." He faced her again. "I interfered because she taught me that standing by while others suffer makes us complicit in their pain. I saved you because it was right, not because I wanted anything from you." For a long moment, Rena stood silent. Then she sank into a chair, looking suddenly vulnerable. "I don't know how to be free anymore," she whispered. "I don't remember who I was before all this." "Then we'll help you remember." He picked up his sword again, resuming his maintenance ritual. "But first, we need to deal with Kuranos. Get some rest. Tomorrow will come soon enough." As Rena left the room, her steps more uncertain than when she entered, Thorn allowed himself to remember Lili's last smile, her final words about never letting the galaxy steal your soul. He hadn't saved Rena because of Lili, but perhaps Lili had saved him so that one day he could save others. The city's lights continued to flicker outside, and somewhere in the darkness their enemies were plotting. But for now, in this quiet moment, two broken people had begun to see each other as they truly were, beyond the labels the galaxy had forced upon them. Dawn broke over Xaridos, casting long shadows through the safe house's training area. Thorn moved through his sword forms, each motion precise and deadly. The morning routine helped clear his mind, though today his awareness kept drifting to Rena, who watched from the doorway with undisguised interest. "Your technique is beautiful," she said, entering the room, "like a dance with death." Thorn completed his sequence before responding. "Want to learn? A Zalan warrior?" Her laugh held a hint of bitterness. "We're not exactly known for combat skills. Neither were humans once." He tossed her a practice sword. "Times change." In his palace chamber, Prince Kuranos watched surveillance footage of the arena incident, his fingers tracing the scar on his neck, a reminder of the day his family shattered. The Zalan woman who'd seduced his father, her violet skin glowing as she tore their household apart. His father's madness, his mother's suicide. "Never again," he whispered. Back in the safe house, Thorn adjusted Rena's grip on the sword. Her skin was warm under his hands, and he noticed her slight intake of breath at the contact. But there was something different about it. Not the usual Zalan effect on humans, but something more personal. "You're thinking too much," he said, stepping back. "Let your body learn the movement." "That's usually my line," she quipped, but her eyes held uncertainty. "Though you seem remarkably immune to my natural talents. Focus on the sword." They trained through the morning, Rena proving a quick study. Between sequences, she revealed more about her diplomatic past, her efforts to secure rights for her people. Thorn found himself impressed by her strategic mind. "Your people weren't always slaves," he said during a break. "What changed?" Rena's expression darkened. "Fear. The civilized races discovered what we could do, how we could make them feel. They decided we were too dangerous to remain free." She tested her blade's balance. "Some, like Kuranos, built entire political philosophies around controlling us." Speaking of the prince, Thorn shared the intelligence he'd gathered. "He's planning something bigger than arena executions. Mass extinction protocols, hidden in legitimate research facilities. Genocide. Rena's violet skin paled. He truly means to end us all. Their planning session was interrupted by an urgent message from one of Thorne's contacts. Security footage showed Karinos meeting with black market weapons dealers, discussing something called Project Purification. As they reviewed the information, Thorne became aware of how close Rena stood, her shoulder brushing his. The contact felt electric, different from the usual Zalan effect. He caught her studying him, her expression thoughtful. "You're not like other humans," she said softly. "You're not like anyone I've met since Lyle." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then an explosion rocked the building, shattering the window and sending them both diving for cover. "Looks like we've been found," Thorne said, drawing his real sword. Rena grabbed her practice blade, holding it with newfound confidence. "Then let's show them what a Zalan warrior can do." The attack came from all sides. Elite guards in Karinos' colors breached the safe house, their weapons a mix of traditional blades and forbidden tech. Thorne and Rena fought back to back, her newly learned moves complementing his experienced strikes. Memory flashed. Karinos as a child, watching his father waste away in the Zalan's arms. "She's destroying him," his mother had whispered. "Their kind destroys everything they touch." The next day, she'd walked into the palace's fusion core. The Zal-An had disappeared, leaving his father a broken shell. Rena's practice sword found a guard's weak point, dropping him. "Not bad for a pleasure slave," she called to Thorne, a fierce grin on her face. "Less talking, more fighting," he replied, but pride colored his voice. They carved a path to the building's lower levels, where a hidden exit waited. But as they reached the basement, a hologram of Karinos materialized before them. "How touching," the prince sneered. "The primitive and the whore, playing at being warriors." His image flickered. "Did she tell you how her kind works, barbarian? How they twist emotions until nothing remains?" "Your trauma doesn't justify genocide," Rena shot back. "What happened to your family was tragic, but—" "You dare speak of my family?" Karinos' composed mask cracked. "Your kind destroyed everything I loved. Now you'll watch as I cleanse the galaxy of your poison. Project Purification launches in 3 days." The hologram vanished as more guards poured in. Thorne grabbed Rena's hand, pulling her toward the exit. "We need to move." They escaped into maintenance tunnels beneath the city, ancient passages untouched by modern tech. When they finally stopped to rest, Rena's hand was still in his. She didn't pull away. "What he said," she began, "doesn't matter." Thorne turned to face her. "We are who we choose to be, not what others make of us." Their eyes met in the dim tunnel light. Something shifted between them, a recognition, a possibility. Rena stepped closer, her free hand touching his chest. "I feel different with you," she whispered. "Not like the automatic response others have to my kind. This is real," he finished. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, everything their violent day hadn't been. When they parted, Rena's violet skin seemed to glow. "Well," she said, a hint of her old playfulness returning. "That was worth waiting for." Thorne almost smiled. "We still have a genocide to stop." "True." She squeezed his hand. "But perhaps tonight we could—" An alarm blared through the tunnels, cutting her off. Emergency broadcasts announced a citywide lockdown. Karinos was mobilizing his forces. "Later," Thorne promised. They moved through the darkness together, no longer just survivor and savior, but partners in every sense. The galaxy's fate might hang in the balance, but in that moment, something equally important had been forged in the shadows beneath Zaridos. They found refuge in an abandoned tech monastery. one of the old religious orders that had rejected modern augmentation. Stone walls 3 meters thick blocked surveillance, and ancient meditation chambers provided privacy. As night fell, Thorne watched Rena poring over stolen data on Project Purification. "The facility is here," she said, pointing to a holographic map. "Disguised as a medical research center, but really," she faltered. "A death factory," Thorne finished grimly. Another memory surfaced. Young Karinos watching his father deteriorate, the once proud man begging in the streets for just one more touch from the Zal-An who'd abandoned him. The shame of it had driven Karinos to his first kill, not the Zal-An, but his own father, a mercy he still saw in his nightmares. "You're thinking too hard again," Rena said, moving to stand behind Thorne. Her hands found his shoulders, kneading tense muscles. "We both need rest before tomorrow." He turned to face her. In the monastery's candlelight, her violet skin took on deeper hues, making her look almost ethereal. But it was the intelligence in her eyes, the strength she'd shown during their escape, that drew him in. "I meant what I said earlier," she murmured, "about feeling different with you. No one's ever seen me as just me, not my race, not my abilities. Just Rena." Thorne cupped her face with calloused hands. "You're a warrior now. You've proven that." "I'm more than that." She pressed closer. "We both are." Their second kiss was different from the first, deeper, hungrier. Rena's natural Zalan abilities heightened every sensation, but there was something beyond physical pleasure, a connection that transcended biology. Later, as they lay tangled in borrowed blankets, Rena traced the scars on his chest. "Tell me about them?" "Each one's a story," he said. "Like this." He guided her hand to a jagged mark near his heart. "The day I lost my family to the Alacris. And this one." He moved to his shoulder. "When I met Lily. You loved her very much." "I did." He studied her face in the darkness. "But she taught me that the past doesn't have to define us, that we can choose who we become." "Like I'm choosing now?" Rena smiled. "From diplomat to slave to warrior?" "To partner," he corrected. Her expression softened. "I think I could love you, despite everything the galaxy's taught me about humans, about anyone not Zalan." "I think I already do," Thorne admitted quietly. They made this again, slower this time, learning each other's bodies and hearts. When dawn finally crept through the monastery's ancient windows, they rose together, warriors and lovers, ready to face whatever came next. But in his palace, Karinos watched the city wake, his hand clutching a locket containing his mother's image. "Soon," he whispered, "soon you'll be avenged, and no one will ever fall prey to their corruption again." Project Purification's countdown continued, unaware that two unlikely heroes were preparing to challenge its deadly purpose. The real battle was about to begin, and this time, the stakes were higher than ever. The monastery's war room buzzed with activity as Thorne and Rena finalized their plans. Intelligence gathered from their network of allies revealed the full scope of Project Purification, a virus designed to target Zalan DNA, masked as a medical breakthrough. "The public ceremony is tomorrow," Rena said, studying the blueprints of Karinos' palace. "He'll announce it as a cure for what he calls the Zalan curse." In his chambers, Karinos held a vial of shimmering liquid, the fruit of years of research and hatred. But as he stared at his reflection, his mother's last words echoed, "It's not what they are, my son. It's the choices we make." He dismissed those words then. Now they haunted him. "His guards will expect a frontal assault," Thorne noted, running a hand along his sword's edge. "They won't look for us in the ceremony itself." Rena's violet skin seemed to pulse with determination. "I can still pass as a pleasure servant. No one questions our presence at royal functions." "No." Thorne's voice was firm. "We go in together, as equals. She touched his face gently. You've taught me more than just fighting, you know. You've shown me that we're not defined by our past or our species. You taught me that too. He caught her hand, kissing her palm. After Lyle, I thought I'd never... I know. Her smile held both sadness and hope. Whatever happens tomorrow, we've already won something precious. They spent that night memorizing plans and each other's bodies, knowing it might be their last chance. As dawn approached, Rena spoke into the darkness. The Zalan who hurt Karinos' family, she was wrong. But so is he, blaming an entire race for one person's crimes. Some people can't see past their pain, Thorn replied. They let it twist them until revenge is all that's left. Like you almost did? Like I would have, if not for Lily. And now you. They rose as the first light touched the monastery's ancient stones. Their plan was risky, but they had something Karinos had lost, the ability to see beyond hatred and fear to the possibility of change. Ready? Thorn asked, offering his hand. Rena took it, violet fingers intertwining with his. Ready. Let's show the galaxy that love is stronger than hate. Now you sound like a diplomat again. No. Her eyes sparkled with determination. I sound like someone who's finally found their true path, and their true partner. As they stepped out into the pre-dawn light, they knew the coming battle would determine not just their fate, but the future of human-Zalan relations. But whatever came next, they would face it together, warrior and diplomat, human and Zalan, two hearts beating as one. The stage was set for the final confrontation. Karinos' tragedy would either consume the galaxy in hatred or be transformed into a chance for redemption. And in the end, it would come down not to race or biology, but to the choices each of them made. The palace of Zaridos blazed with celebration lights on Prince Karinos' 25th birthday. Through the grand halls, Thorn and Rena moved like shadows among the guests, their disguises perfect down to the smallest detail. 12 hostages, Rena whispered, her violet skin temporarily masked by advanced holographic tech. All Zalan women held in the lower chambers. Thorn adjusted his ceremonial guard's uniform. And the project? Ready to launch at midnight, he wants it to align with the exact moment of his birth. Above them, Karinos presided over the festivities from his elevated throne. He raised a crystal glass of 1,000-year-old earth wine, his eyes fever-bright with anticipation. My friends, his voice boomed across the hall. Tonight, we celebrate not just my birthday, but the dawn of a new era, an era free from corruption, from the poisonous influence that has plagued our society. In the security center, a timer counted down. The hologram message from his mother, sealed for 25 years, waited to be delivered. Your Highness. An elderly advisor approached the throne, carrying a small metallic sphere. As instructed by your mother, to be opened at this precise moment. Karinos' face softened at the mention of his mother, the only genuine emotion Thorn had ever seen from him. Ah, yes, her final gift to me. Project Purification will be her vindication. The sphere activated, projecting the image of a regal woman. But as she began to speak, her composed expression crumbled into tears. My beloved son, there is something you must know, something I've carried in silence all these years. The hall fell silent as the truth emerged. Karinos was not her son by birth. His true mother was a Zalan woman, one of his father's many affairs. Unable to bear children herself, she had raised him as her own, loving him despite his heritage. Karinos' face went ash white. No, no, this is a trick. Your skin, Rena whispered to Thorn. Look at his skin in the true light. Under the harsh glare of the throne room's illumination, A faint violet undertone became visible on Karinos's exposed flesh, subtle enough to have been dismissed all his life, but unmistakable to those who knew what to look for. "The prince is one of us," Rena breathed. "All this time, his hatred was self-hatred," Thorn finished grimly. Karinos staggered from his throne, the wine glass shattering on the marble floor. Lies. All lies. But his hands trembled as he stared at his skin in the harsh light. "My son," the hologram continued, tears streaming down his mother's face, "I loved you as my own. Your father's affair with the Zalan woman wasn't her fault. We were the ones who betrayed our vows, our principles. Don't let my shame become your hatred." The prince's composure cracked completely. He pulled out a control device, his finger hovering over the activation switch. "I'll prove it. I'll launch Project Purification now. If I were one of them, it would kill me too." Thorn moved first, shedding his disguise as he vaulted toward the throne. "Stop!" Guards rushed to intercept him, but years of combat experience showed in every motion as he dispatched them with economical strikes. Rena disabled her holographic mask, her violet skin glowing as she fought her way to the hostage's controls. "Look at yourself," she called to Karinos. "Look at what hatred has made you willing to do. Genocide against your own kind." "I am not one of you." Karinos' voice cracked. He stumbled back, pressing another control that dropped a security barrier between him and his attackers. "I am my mother's son. I am—" "You're exactly what you've always feared," Thorn said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "But it's not your blood that made you this way. It's your choices." The hologram flickered again. "My dearest boy," his mother's image pleaded, "I didn't tell you this to hurt you. I told you so you would understand. Love transcends race, biology. Everything we think defines us. I chose to love you, regardless of your birth." Karinos stared at his reflection in the barrier's surface, really seeing the subtle violet undertones for the first time. His hand moved to his neck, where the scar from his childhood remained, not from a Zalan attack as he'd claimed, but self-inflicted in his first moment of discovering his true nature. "How many?" he whispered. "How many of my kind have I tortured? Killed? All because I couldn't face what I was." The project control slipped from his fingers. For a moment hope flickered in Rena's eyes, but then Karinos smiled, a terrible, broken expression. "Mother," he said to the hologram, "I failed you, both of you." He pulled out an ornate dagger. "I cannot live as what I've hated." "No." Rena lunged forward, but the barrier held. With one swift motion, Karinos drove the blade into his heart. As he fell, his last words were barely audible. "I'm sorry." The barrier dissolved with his death, and chaos erupted in the throne room. But amidst it all, Thorn and Rena moved with purpose, securing the project controls, freeing the hostages, and taking command of the situation with natural authority. The days following Karinos' death transformed Xaridos. The palace guards, witnessing Thorn's strength and honor during the crisis, pledged their loyalty to him. The nobility, impressed by Rena's diplomatic skills as she prevented civil war from erupting, began to see her as more than just a Zalan. In the throne room, now cleared of the tragic events, Thorn and Rena faced the assembled council. "The prince's death leaves a vacuum," the High Chancellor stated, "one that must be filled before our enemies strike." "The people need leadership they can trust," another counselor added. "Someone who understands both tradition and progress." Rena stepped forward, her violet skin radiant in the morning light streaming through the palace windows. "What they need is balance, a bridge between worlds." "The old ways and the new," Thorn agreed, standing beside her. "Human and Zalan, strength and diplomacy." The council chambers erupted in discussion, but the outcome was inevitable. The story of their victory, of their love transcending prejudice, had already spread through the city. The people saw in them hope for a different future. Memory flickered. Thorn remembered his first kills, the weight of vengeance that had driven him. Now he felt something different, the weight of responsibility shared with someone who understood both burden and blessing. The coronation ceremony blended traditions from both cultures. Thorn wore ceremonial armor that incorporated both human military precision and Zalan artistic flourishes. Rena's gown combined royal purple with earth metals, symbolizing the union of their peoples. "I never thought I'd see this day," she whispered as they prepared. "A Zalan queen, accepted by humans." "And a human king," Thorn replied, "who learned that true strength comes from love, not hate." Their first acts as rulers reflected their vision. They established new laws protecting all races' rights, while maintaining the traditional combat trials that tested character rather than technology. The arena was transformed into a training ground where different species could learn from each other. Project Purification's research was repurposed, its deadly potential converted into medical breakthroughs that benefited all races. The 12 rescued hostages became the first members of a new diplomatic corps, trained in both combat and negotiation. In their private moments, Thorn and Rena found their bond growing stronger. Their differences complemented each other, his focused discipline balancing her intuitive grace, her diplomatic insight tempering his warrior's instincts. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked one night, tracing the scars on his chest. "Saving me that day in the arena?" "Never." He pulled her closer. "Though I regret not being able to save Karinos from himself." "We can't save everyone," she said softly, "but we can build something better from the ashes of hatred." Their rule became legendary across the galaxy. Stories spread of the warrior king who never ran from a fight, and his Zalan queen whose wisdom matched her beauty. Their love became a symbol of hope, proof that the barriers between races were artificial, created by fear and misunderstanding. Years passed, and Zaridos flourished. The palace gardens, once symbolic of rigid control, bloomed with plants from both Earth and Zalan worlds. In the evening, Thorn would often find Rena there, teaching their children, both human and Zalan orphans they'd adopted, about the importance of choosing love over hate. "Look at them," she said one such evening, watching their eldest daughter master both sword forms and diplomatic protocols. "They don't see differences, they just see family." Thorn wrapped his arms around her, feeling the familiar warmth of her skin against his. "They see truth, the kind Karinos couldn't face." "And what truth is that?" "That love isn't about what we are," he said, echoing words from long ago. "It's about who we choose to be." The sun set over their kingdom, casting the city in shades of purple and gold. In the distance, ships arrived from across the galaxy, bringing those who sought to learn from their example. The cycle of hatred had been broken, replaced by something stronger, the power of choice, of love freely given and received. As night fell, Thorn and Rena stood on their balcony, watching their transformed world. They had found in each other not just love, but purpose, a chance to show the galaxy that the greatest strength comes not from domination or purity, but from the courage to embrace difference and change. "Ready for tomorrow's challenges?" Rena asked, her eyes sparkling with the same spirit that had first captured his heart. Thorn's answer was a kiss, gentle but filled with promise. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new chances to prove that their love could overcome any obstacle. But tonight, they were simply Thorn and Rena, no longer warrior and slave, but partners in every sense, ruling their kingdom with the wisdom born of both suffering and joy. The stars shone above Zaridos, witnessing the legacy of two people who dared to love beyond boundaries, who proved that the heart knows no race, and that true power lies not in conquest, but in the courage to choose a better path. The end, dear fellow wanderers of the cosmos. If you've made it this far, you've survived arena battles, political intrigue, and enough violet-skinned romance to make James Cameron's Na'vi blush. Not bad for a story that started with a chained diplomat and a guy who thinks running away is something that happens to other people. You know, writing this was like trying to land the Millennium Falcon while blindfolded. Terrifying, probably ill-advised, but somehow we stuck the landing. Between Thorne's stab first, ask questions later approach to problem solving and Rena's diplomacy with a side of seduction strategy, I'm amazed the palace is still standing. To those who stuck with me through every sword swing and stolen glance, you're braver than a Klingon at a peace conference. Your willingness to explore this universe where ancient combat meets high tech, because apparently the future still needs people who are really good with pointy metal sticks, means everything. Special thanks to anyone who didn't immediately close the book when they realized our hero's solution to everything was, "I'll fight it." Also, appreciation to those who accepted that in a galaxy full of laser guns and AI, everyone still somehow ends up in an arena with medieval weapons. Hey, if it works for Dune, and yes, I know what you're thinking. Another story where the power of love saves the day. Well, in my defense, have you tried defeating space racism with spreadsheets? Much less exciting. To quote a wise man who once faced his own daddy issues in a galaxy far, far away, "The Force will be with you, always." In this case, replace the Force with questionable decision-making skills and unexpectedly successful romance. May your own stories be as wild as a malfunctioning teleporter and your loves as true as a properly calibrated quantum compass. With gratitude as vast as space and humor as dark as a black hole, your storyteller. P.S. No Earth lions were harmed in the writing of this story. The same cannot be said for Prince Karinos' ego. P.P.S. If anyone needs me, I'll be in the arena, teaching diplomats how to sword fight, because apparently that's a transferable skill in this universe.